Over 40% of Canadian births in 2024 came from foreign-born mothers, and the country is quietly changing. New data from Statistics Canada finds that more than 40% of babies born in 2024 had mothers born abroad, nearly double the share from a generation ago. In major cities, we're seeing demographics shift in real time. Brampton is 59% foreign-born, Mississauga 57%, Toronto 51.9%, Surrey 50.8%, and Vancouver 48.8%. These are not fringe places, they are pillars of the country's economic life. At this scale, the debate is no longer about goodwill or values, it's about math. When newcomers make up half a city, they shape the norms, the culture, and the politics. In Brampton, South Asians account for 52.4% of the population, yet hold all 5 federal seats. Numbers decide the outcome. Other nations treat their diaspora as strategic assets. Canada pretends the question is kindness, but once the numbers shift, so does the country itself. So, is assimilation possible when newcomers form the majority in key cities?
No. Ultimately, no, it's not, right? Like assimilation, if you think about it objectively, is sort of a scale game. It's about owning the majority, and you and I have this conversation about being on a ship, and if you've got 2 different captains that want to go 2 different places with 2 different crews, you basically have who's got a bigger crew and who wins that war, and then that's the one direction that you go. I'm not suggesting that because we've got this many people here that are foreign born that it's a war, quote unquote. But what you do have is 2 cultures that have a lot, not necessarily like opposition as in like that's a terrible thing. We just live a different way, right? So you're seeing a lot, we have different interests. So that's what I think is happening in Canada. And that's what I think happens with assimilation. It's like, if you don't own the majority, you can't push assimilation. And then why I said that actually was more towards your political perspective in that piece is if you don't own the majority, you don't own the political landscape at all, right? And one thing you do see, like you say, okay, it was about 52%, 53% were South Asian in Brampton, right? But the thing is, they're a more tight-knit community because there's a cultural connection there. So the others say 48%, it's probably a scatter graph. Mm-hmm. I have friends that live up there that are from several different cultures, none of which are Southeast Asian in this case. So you think about it, and it's like that other 48% is not voting necessarily in a cohesive block. So their 52% might as well be 80% in terms of controlling the political narrative landscape, et cetera. Why that's important, this is kind of beyond the assimilation, but it does connect. Why that's important is you look at places like Brampton. I'm surprised how high it was in Mississauga. You look at Brampton, Mississauga, Toronto, Surrey. You look at these major cities, these major hubs, and these are key cities for federal, provincial ridings. Like they're very, very important. Even the mayoral race in Mississauga was very important. I was in that conversation for a little while, and Trudeau was backing Bonnie Crombie. So it's a very important riding to just maintain whatever political wind they need from that arena, whatever they need. Like they take that very seriously. So when you look at those cities and go, okay, we're very likely to lose the cultural assimilation, and now we're very likely to start losing the political foothold. And why that matters when you're in these key cities is eventually you start losing the larger footprint of your political stance, essentially. So you look at what's happening, and essentially, if you want to win at the federal level, it seems pretty clear to me that you need the vote of all these foreign-born people that are coming in that have only been here not even a generation, right? Like that's kind of what's happening. So not only do you lose assimilation, not only do you lose the culture war, you have to placate to this new culture that's now here to even control your own federal politics. So I would say that we're 2 steps away from assimilation. I think we're a step and a half away from Canada just becoming this sort of melting pot you can never get control over again.
Yeah, well, even the analogy that I used in this original piece was, you used the ship analogy, but it's also just like, think of a house party. If let's say there's 10 people there and 2 new people show up, they are going to enter the vibe, quote unquote, the culture, right, of the established party, of what's already going on. But if you have 8 people walk into a party of 10 or 12 people walk into a party of 10, now they can really start to actually set the vibe. And then things can change pretty quickly. And two, when it comes to elections, a lot of people would probably push back and say, well, let's say they got here 2-3 years ago. They can't vote if they're not citizens yet or whatever. But there's also a bigger issue here when it comes to the leadership races within our party system, because okay, we had Mark Carney come in and first had to win the Liberal leadership race before he could run for or be put in, essentially implemented as prime minister. However, on party races, there is almost next to no guardrails. They do it themselves. It's not like the Elections Canada aspect. And this is where you've gotten the scandals in the past before with like the Handong ridings and stuff, where you've got international students getting bussed in. So yeah, people might say, well, they can't vote on the prime minister themselves in an election or in a federal election, but they can vote on who I get to vote for.
Right.
So that's a big thing. That's something that a lot of people overlook. And then you look at how this plays out, right? When in Brampton, they've got all 5 of the federal seats.
So it's like what you're saying is not only like you're not forecasting, it's objective.
Yeah.
And if you have to go to that house party, you're probably listening to Hindustani classics. Fuck. Oh man.
Yeah, but and then the other aspect too is nation states, foreign nation states, whether it's anybody that's playing a geopolitical game is playing this game. So whether it's Russia, Israel, China, India, America, they all do this. They all set up community groups in foreign nations of expats, and they don't look at these people as ex-citizens. They look at them as current citizens of their original country.
It's a foreign militia, essentially,
Well, for not necessarily like violently, but for actual voting ability, you even see it right when it was the Aaron O'Toole race when he was the conservative leader. You went and looked around in certain areas within like Chinatown and stuff, and they had all these posters put up of like by these community groups, which are really just United Front actors. So the foreign wing of the Chinese Communist Party, and they're setting up all of this propaganda against Aaron O'Toole. And you go, why? Why are they allowed to do this? Like, because it's not just Canadian citizens voicing their opinions. It's foreign nations using their ex-communities and citizens as political tools in our nation.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting when you think about it from the pro-immigration perspective. Now, let me clarify. Immigration's been a cornerstone of Canada's GDP since World War II. Fine, no problem with that. And I think immigration is important. When you bring them in at an adequate rate, no faster than your infrastructure can allow, and at a rate that you can adequately assimilate. That's how I feel about immigration. So I don't think it's a problem. The numbers we're doing at are literally 5x, 500% that number. So it is a problem now. And for everyone that's just like, oh, there's no such thing as a legal immigrant. There's no this, there's no that. Let everybody in, open borders, blah, 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 blah. Here's the problem. You lose your country. You lose your country, right? So the things that you think are important to you today, even the culture that you think is important and that you believe in and you buy into, your liberal or democratic culture that you have now over associated with, just because everything is politicized, you are going to be the cause of your own demise. Because like you said, there already is a dogfight for power over Canada, and it's not Canada, quote unquote, traditional Canada in the driver's seat. It's China, it's India, it's these other nations that are kind of fighting over it, and they're now swaying elections. How much longer do people think it takes until, these are the people actually running the country, not playing a pivotal role in who gets elected, but running it? Mm-hmm. I don't think it's that far away. And then all those people that fought for these open borders and this sort of rampant immigration policy, the Canada that you think you love and know is gone. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I would suggest it's probably already too late to correct course, given the numbers you explained, I don't see how we backtrack.
I know how you could. You could fix this pretty easily with a few things. So you immediately implement a policy that you have to be a net positive taxpayer in Canada for, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 5 years before you can start using social programs. I think that would deter a lot of this. Then you also, I can't remember where I heard this idea. It's definitely not mine, but it makes a lot of sense. If you're importing or immigrating people from another nation and more than 10% of those people use social programs and they're a net negative on the tax system, then you cease all immigration from that nation. And I'm like, that makes sense. But just to your point about success rates as well, is that the Chinese Communist Party, Sam Cooper reported on this in regard to the 2021 federal election, I believe. It was either the 2019 or 2021. But there was an internal document from the Chinese Communist Party that showed they were bragging about having a 20% success rate in Canada's elections in preferred candidates, quote unquote. And so even you just think about that, okay, the NDP in our latest election got 6 seats, right?
7, I think.
6,
maybe
7.
6, yeah.
And then before that, even it was they had roughly 20% of the vote in 2021.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, so the Chinese Communist Party has as much success getting their candidates into place or their preferred candidates as the NDP, which is the third
largest
major
party. Yeah.
Right. And you go, wow. So you could arguably make the case that the Chinese Communist Party is the third largest party in Canada.
Right.
But just your one point about the economics and immigration as well is I've been making this pivot for about a year now. But I don't think the number one way to measure a country's health is GDP. I just don't think it is. Like, we've already seen it. Our GDP overall, our total GDP has gone up over the last few years, but objectively, everyone's life is getting worse. So I just don't think it's a good marker for national health. And actually, somebody messaged me and made a really good point, and so I'm just going to read it off verbatim, the message I got here. But excuse the nerdiness here. But you've seen Lord of the Rings, right? No,
I'm not a nerd.
Star Wars fan.
Yeah. 100%.
Anyways, heard a guy rant about Rivendell versus Mordor. So Rivendell is like where the elves live, and it's this kind of like amazing place.
Just pretend I know, because I'm sure a lot of the audience knows.
Well, hey, but if they don't,
okay.
So Rivendell is like this, magical place ran by elves. Great. And then Mordor is hell, essentially. And so Rivendell has flat to no GDP growth. They don't produce much, reforge and recycle swords. Mordor's GDP is estimated to be 32% growth rate, producing new things, high birth rates, logging and resource extraction, and war manufacturing. But which one would you rather live in? It's not always the numbers and adding debt that crushes every economy. And so far, 100% of fiat currencies end up at $0. There's been about 7,100 of them so far, and Canada seems to want to fast track that. And so this is that point, though, is that like I don't just think look, industry is important for things, national security and all of this kind of stuff. But if you're telling me that that's the number one value I have to hold for the measurement of how well our country is doing, then if meeting that or continuing to raise that over the next couple years depends on us completely getting rid of our culture and our way of life, then I'm sorry, that to me is not a trade-off I'd be willing to make.
Okay, so a couple things. You said that it would be easy to sort of fix the immigration problem we have by getting rid of net positive taxpayers, that people that are not net positive rather, and then cutting off nations that fall under their threshold. Those are both very difficult things. Those are not easy. Those are almost impossible to implement. Those would be seen through the liberal lens as so egregious, and they'd be racist, homophobic, they'd be xenophobic. So it just wouldn't be easy. Like in principle, the concept is easy, but the reality of application is almost 0%.
If you had a majority, it's very easy.
The thing is do you think society, when you've already got more than 50% in these larger cities that have people that are foreign born.
Sorry, let me make a distinction here actually then. The difference between simple and easy. Maybe it's not easy, but it is simple.
Oh, it's simple for sure. I agree. But definitely, I think there's no political will to employ it. That's the problem. I don't think it's difficult. You could also just start deporting people.
Actually, if you look at the immigration numbers and stuff when it comes to polling numbers in Canada and people's attitudes towards it, it is a majority issue. Most people would get on board with something like that. However, yes, you would have the liberal media just continually attacking you and calling you those things.
I still don't think you would. I understand what you're saying, but the thing is people don't really understand. Now, to your next thing about GDP, people don't really understand how. Well, a lot of people do. So I'm not trying to be mean to anyone that does get it. But when people are like, yeah, we don't want people here, stop the immigration, curb it. Who cares about our GDP? So I agree. I think GDP per capita is a better metric to use. But it's also it is just a metric. It's just a way of keeping score. There are definitely better ways to, like, I'd almost use a happiness index over a GDP index, if I'm being honest with you, about how like your citizens feel. You know what I mean? Like the Scandinavian countries always seem to do the best there. They're taxed to hell. So I agree that it's not the best tool to use. However, it is just sort of the global metrics. I think per capita is a more important thing to do, but this kind of wraps everything together. And you know this, like our country's built on these social programs. And the thing is, you have an evaporating tax base. So I understand they're bringing in people that are not contributing to it now, but their game plan is bring people in, because when you bring volume, you force infrastructure to grow. Rather than build infrastructure adequately, then drop people in, what they've decided to do is bring people in and then force the infrastructure. Because the thing is, when you go infrastructure first, you can't control the pace. People can move slowly because of capitalism. People can go supply demand. There's no reason to expand. I don't need more healthcare, more restaurants. I don't need these things. We're fine. Everybody that's got these businesses, they're doing well, and people don't want to enter them. But if you add a bunch of people without choice, no matter what, you're going to scale your infrastructure. It's just a really messy process.
But we haven't done that.
But we are in the middle of doing it. It is happening. It's just the economy's not in a great place. But
like we're building less homes than the 1970s, or even if you look at the GDP per capita metric that you're talking about.
GDP per capita is down. That's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing that that's a problem. But what I'm saying is their game plan is to do exactly what I said, bring people in and scale infrastructure. That's what's going to happen. You want to talk about housing. The reason that housing isn't scaling is because just a small number of really, really big players own most of the land in Canada and dictate whether or not it's being built on. But because it's not economically feasible, they're not doing it. So they're actually having a policy war with the government. Small guys are continuing to build, but big guys aren't, because it's not there's no money to be made. So until the government actually relaxes on the 32% soft costs, these big developers aren't going to build. They don't care what happens to the market. They own the land and they're all billionaires. This all happened through two big downturns in Canada in the 90s and in the late 2000s. So that's what's actually happening in housing more than anything. And then when it comes to infrastructure, it is a hand being forced. Eventually, you won't have enough room for people to go to grocery stores, to go to restaurants, to do all these things. Yes, the economy's down right now. So you can't take the exact situation you're in right now. You can't take a snapshot and go, no, here's why. I understand the economy's struggling because we shouldn't be letting this many people in at once, and it's costing the government and therefore taxpayers to afford it anyway. But what I'm saying is we are going to get through a squeeze point, and then what's going to happen is we are going to see our infrastructure scale up. It's a very natural thing. If you go from 35 million to 45 million, what has to happen? You have to have places for people to live. We actually do have a surplus of homes. The whole shortage thing, we have a surplus of homes. People just don't want to live in those areas. If you do the math, we have more than enough places. And that's based on the number of homes and the average number of person per home. So we're good there. If anybody wants to look that up, you can check the math on it. I know it's right. So the thing is you're going to see this scale up. But to my point is, it's a very messy process when you force people in and then demand that infrastructure keep up, because it does make your economy struggle. It does make things cost more. It creates a big mess, which is what we're in. But why they're doing it this way is the most important thing for these people is increasing the tax base. So over the next 5 years, things will stabilize in some sense. We may not like the way it looks, but you will start to see some sort of stabilization in the economy. There will be more places for every component of infrastructure will scale up, and it will be moving at a more adequate rate to keep up with our pace of immigration, because they need to keep scaling it to replace the tax base to keep the social programs in place. They don't have a choice. So that's actually what I think is happening here. And if you just look at it from a relatively objective numbers game, it seems pretty clear.
I don't think so, because if you look at it, your idea is that they want to bring these people in to make their, because then they'll scale infrastructure and housing and all of this kind of stuff, and they'll make more money from that because they have more people to sell to, right? But that's not actually what we've been seeing over the last 10 years. And again, it's not a snapshot, it is a decade, because
you've only seen the massive increase of immigration in the last 3 years.
Because what you're seeing is the artificial inflation of the assets. It's because of our monetary policy and immigration. And so you've got money flooding the economy, which then ends up, we saw this throughout COVID, is that all of this stimulus, all these, investments end up flowing into the big hands. And so it doesn't actually help the people on the low, because then what happens when you put more money into the economy is the cost of everything goes up. It's inflation. This is like genuine, just like numbers, monetary policy. And so they're getting artificially more rich. These billionaires aren't becoming billionaires because they've created and become more productive. They're becoming billionaires because we're inflating and debasing our currency.
I think you're conflating two ideas.
How?
I'm not talking about billionaires. I'm talking about the government and needing a tax base to support social programs. That's the foundation of my argument. You need this. Right.
But all of our social programs are under complete strain right now. So it doesn't make sense.
Of course they are, but this is why they need to replace the tax base so that it can actually continue to move forward. If you don't actually create a large tax base to pay for our aging population, what happens to those people? The only solution you have at that point is to print money, but you still have a massive population problem. You need an increasing population.
Cut social programs.
Yeah, but they can't. But the thing is, they effectively can't, because how can you do that to the entire boomer generation? There's you
mean the people that have gotten rich over the last decade because all their assets have inflated?
Sure, some of them. The only thing is, most boomers actually just own a home. Most boomers don't have assets. Most people aren't that good with their money.
Yeah, but sure, their housing has doubled over the last decade.
If they can sell it, that's fine. But the thing is, it doesn't mean they have money.
Or they can borrow against it.
Again, these social programs that exist, our healthcare, all these other things, they have to be stimulated by a tax base. And the thing is, if more people need to depend on our healthcare, if more people need to depend on welfare, old age, all these other things, you need a tax base to fill that up. You need it. And what I'm saying is, we've had a declining birth rate, which started in the 1970s. So immigration has been a cornerstone of it scaling our GDP. That's not incorrect. You can argue about the pace that we should have done it at. And I just said, we're doing it at 500% more than I think we should have. In fact, I think if they were going to do it right, rather than 250 a year, 250,000, they should have been targeting about 400,000 a year for the last 30, 40 years. It would have been much more sustainable. They just got the numbers wrong. So now they're pouring people in to fill the tax base to support these social programs. What I'm saying is, they can't bring high value people in quick enough. So they're hedging their bets that it's just a volume game. Let's just get these people in here, even if they're not high value earners, because the infrastructure will scale over the next 5 to 10 years to keep up. And then we've got employees, and we've got a paying tax base, and then we've stabilized. And that's the game that they're playing. It's not about billionaires. I don't give a shit about them. They're going to make their money no matter what. It's just understanding how our actual political system works and how our social program system works. We need the tax base.
You can't separate the two because our prime minister is a billionaire.
You can separate the two because one is purely business, but one has to do with how
we've talked about this all the time about the intersection between politics and business.
Again, you're conflating
that they're completely inseparable.
What do all the people? How do all the people that are coming in from immigration to become part of a tax base to pay for social programs? How does that correlate to the billionaire conversation?
But it doesn't make sense at all, because of course your idea is that these people are coming in and they're being a net positive on the tax base. But
not now. I'm saying they're going to be when the infrastructure scales and they have employment.
There's no proof of that.
Well, what do you? Okay, so your argument then, effectively, is that there's not going to be enough homes for these people, and there's not going to be a big enough infrastructure to employ any of these people. That's what you're saying. That's your argument.
Yeah.
And you think in perpetuity that's how it goes. That's how it plays out. Because
somebody has a short. This is exactly my whole point.
Look around the entire world. It's called supply and demand.
Yeah, and so what happens when you when you massively inflate your demand is
you create supply.
No,
people create more supply when there's money to be made. That's how the system works.
Depending.
That's a reach.
Because if you go look at our last financial statement from last year, what you can see is that newcomers are the biggest extractors of social programs.
At this point, like I've said this on the show several times, they're hedging their bets that they're going to have to continue to help these people adapt while the infrastructure grows. The most basic thing in capitalism is supply demand. If you have an increase in demand, you're going to have an increase in supply.
Country. We're not a capitalist country.
We are, though, because if you look around, like, yeah, we make that argument all the time, but the reality is our economy operates in a system of capitalism.
It doesn't.
Yes, it does.
60% of our economy comes from the government.
60% of our economy comes from the... Okay, well...
Over 44% of GDP in Canada is public spending. And when you take into account subsidies and programs, it goes up to 60. So
you're arguing... You're not thinking about... You're just, in my opinion, you're not really hearing me, and you're trying to support your argument, which is okay.
I don't think you're hearing me.
How do you think, when people come to a country, they need infrastructure to survive?
Or you end up in a place, look at where we're bringing people from that are totally okay with 10, 15 people living in one home. Do you think that like all of a sudden changes?
Yes, because they need to eat. They need to have their kids cared for. They need health care. They need all these other things. You're only focusing on homes, which will scale anyway.
I'm not only focusing on homes.
So you don't think any of our other infrastructure is going to scale up as demand is increased for food? You don't think there's going to be more grocery stores, more restaurants, more anything else? As demand increases for healthcare, you don't think that's going to expand?
Wait, okay, so when
I'm asking you a question, yes or no? So no, you don't.
Okay, so I'm looking at, I don't, but like
that's
I haven't seen.
Go look at capitalism around the world. Any system of supply and demand, demand catches up, or supply catches up to demand. That's how it works. And that's what I'm saying is they're forcing through demand to drive supply. That's what they're doing here.
I don't think that's the case at all.
So we disagree. It's all good. We'll just move on. We will see, but I think if you look historically at what I'm saying and you look at any economy around the world that has any semblance of capitalism involved, that's how it works. Supply and demand.
Okay, again, I think our economy is 60% government ran.
That's not sustainable. It has to go the other way.
But so when does it go the other way? Because it's been going one direction for decades.
The thing is, for the last 3 years, we've had a massive increase in population every year. 3 years now. It's been 1.3 to 1.5 million. So now you're seeing the demand drive. So you have to wait. You have to wait until there's going to be a point at which you start increasing supply. I just will not get on board with the fact that you don't think they're going to increase supply with this many people. It makes no sense.
Okay, so forget the last 3 years. Where have you seen that we're heading more and more towards a capitalist society over the last 4 or 5 decades?
That's a different conversation. I'm talking about increasing supply of infrastructure to meet the demand of the number of people you have. It's very simple.
I'm saying that the people in charge and that have a lot of power and wealth in this country that completely control our economic and political system, they are perfectly happy with having 100 homes with those values. I'm just using an arbitrary number here. With those values going from, let's say, $100,000 a home to $1 million a home, they are just as happy to see that happen as they would be to create 100,000 homes. To them, it makes no difference on their bottom line.
Sure, and what I'm saying is the people that actually live in the country will, through the system of capitalism, aside from the government, they will play a game of supply and demand. Because if homes become worth $1 million instead of 100,000, there's going to be a lot more people building them and selling them for 800 because there's a lot of money to be made. That's my point. The entire economy of supply demand will take charge and it will fill the void. You will watch over the next 10 years, Canada will have more restaurants, it'll have more hospitals, it'll have more schools, it'll have more homes, it'll have more of everything.
On Canada? So why do you think Canada's doomed then? If you think everything's going to get better.
I've actually said that Canada will eventually go in the right direction if they start leveraging their natural resources. And I've said this several times. I am not the face of Canada 2.0. I don't want to be a part of it. I don't like our tax system at all. Of course, we've said several times, actually on this show, a lot. I've said this country will be untenable for how long do I say? 10 to 20 years. That's what I always say. So what I mean by that is in 10 to 20 years, it will be a tenable country. I just know I don't like the direction it's going, so I don't want to be a part of it.
Okay, well, I have seen nothing over the last few decades to make me seem that that's going to turn unless we start operating our economy and political structure differently. But if we continue doing on these same things, I don't see this point where we're driving off of a cliff. You look at every metric, everything's getting worse. And then like this is a socialist argument where it's like, yeah, we just have to implement more socialism and then it will work. It's like, No,
this is aside from all of that. This is what you're not willing to step outside of the lens you're looking through right now.
No, I very much am. I'm just saying
so
that
again, like my argument is very simple. I've boiled it down to something very basic. Based on supply and demand and money to be made in a country that's becoming increasingly unaffordable, your argument is that even though there's going to be higher demand, people in the world of Canada, like in society, in the world of capitalism, will not fill that supply. That is incorrect, historically incorrect, and you can watch it happen. It definitely will happen.
And just to wrap up my point is that if you're operating in a free market capitalist system, I agree that those principles make sense, but Canada is not that.
It is more of that than just socialism. I agree, understand that we are moving.
60%.
It's just not a good argument when you look at how society actually operates. When you look at how if you go outside here and you drive anywhere for 5 minutes, you can get to anything you need right now. You can go to a gym. I know the guys that own it. Capitalism. You can go to restaurants. We know guys that own them. We can go anywhere. You can get to a hospital in 10 minutes. I understand that's social, but what I'm talking about infrastructure when I say that. We still operate in a space where small business employs like 60% of people in Canada. It used to be closer to 85 pre-COVID, but it's around 60% right now. So, okay, those aren't government-owned businesses. Those are built on supply and demand. That will increase. If more people want to eat, more restaurants and more grocery stores will pop up. Supply and demand. If there's money to be made, people will fill that void. Not all of the people here are a part of the government. Not all of the people here, they've got to make their own way. We don't fully depend on the government. That's not how the system works. In fact, the older people that do are why we need people filling this tax base.
Yeah, not fully, just 60%.
Okay.
All right, moving on.